The crystalline chamber of the Galactic Assembly stretched 3 kilometers across, filled with representatives from 847 different species. Some floated in anti-gravity fields, others stood on specialized platforms adapted to their biology. The air itself was carefully regulated to accommodate beings who breathed everything from methane to pure hydrogen. At the center of it all sat Speaker Vexther, an ancient reptilian whose scales had turned silver with age. He had presided over this assembly for 300 years. Ambassador Taemin stood at the human delegation's platform, his hands gripping the edge of the speaking podium. He had spent 10 years building relationships across the galaxy, learning customs, attending ceremonies, and earning respect one conversation at a time. Behind him stood Captain Hannah, her military uniform crisp and perfect, her eyes constantly scanning the chamber. Next to her was Jiwon, a young researcher who still believed the galaxy could be better if everyone just worked together. Tae-min had waited 6 hours for his turn to speak. 6 hours of listening to border disputes, trade disagreements, and endless procedural debates. Now, finally, he could address what mattered. 3,000 human civilians were dead. The colony world of New Hanseong had been raided without warning. Without provocation and without mercy, he activated the holographic display. Images of burning homes appeared above the assembly floor. Children's toys scattered in the streets. Medical facilities reduced to slag. The evidence was clear and undeniable. Krell Dominion warships had attacked a civilian target, violating a dozen interstellar laws. Taemin's voice was steady and calm. He had practiced this speech 100 times. He presented orbital surveillance data showing Krell ships entering human space. He showed communication logs proving the colony had attempted to surrender. He showed casualty reports with names and faces. Real people. Real families. All gone. When he finished, he made a simple request. The Galactic Council should enforce its own laws. The Krell Dominion should face consequences. Justice should be served. Speaker Vexther listened with half-closed eyes, as if bored by the entire presentation. When Taemin sat down, the ancient reptilian didn't even pause before calling the next speaker. Warlord Thrak of the Krell Dominion approached the floor, his insectoid body clicking and chittering as he moved. Thrak's translator rendered his words in a dozen languages simultaneously. He claimed the human colony had been harboring pirates. He claimed his forces had acted in self-defense. He claimed humans were warlike and aggressive, that they had probably attacked first. The lies came smoothly, confidently, without shame. Captain Hannah's jaw tightened. Her hand moved instinctively toward where her sidearm would normally rest, but weapons were forbidden in the assembly. Jiwon looked like she might cry. She had truly believed the council would help them. Tae-min remained perfectly still, watching the other delegates. Some species looked sympathetic. Many others looked away, unwilling to meet his eyes. The elder species, those who had been council members for thousands of years, showed nothing but indifference. Speaker Vexther called for a vote. Should the council investigate the incident at New Hanseong? Should they enforce existing laws against unprovoked attacks on civilian populations? The voting took 15 minutes. Representatives pressed buttons on their consoles, casting their decisions anonymously. When the results appeared, Taemin felt something break inside his chest. The council voted to investigate further, but to take no immediate action. Worse, they proposed restrictions on human expansion into contested regions. They called it a stabilizing measure. The final vote was 645 in favor, 202 against. Humanity's request for justice had not just been denied. It had been turned against them. Thrak clicked his mandibles in what his species considered laughter. Several elder species representatives nodded approvingly, as if they had resolved a minor administrative issue rather than condemning murder. Taemin sat frozen in his seat. He had prepared for many outcomes, but not this. Not being blamed for their own victimization. Not being told that seeking justice made them the problem. Captain Hannah leaned close to his ear. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried absolute certainty. Enough. That single word cut through Taemin's shock. He looked at Hannah, then at Jiwon, then at the other 17 members of the human delegation. He saw the same realization in all their eyes. They had come here believing in rules and laws and civilized discourse. They had been fools. Taemin stood slowly. The chamber quieted, curious about what the human ambassador would say. Speaker Vexther waved a clawed hand dismissively, ready to move on to the next item of business, but Taemin's voice stopped him. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was cold and clear and absolutely certain. We came to you seeking justice. We presented evidence. We followed your procedures. We asked only that you enforce your own laws. He paused, letting his words sink in. You have shown us that justice in this chamber belongs only to the ancient and the powerful. You have shown us that our lives mean nothing to you. You have shown us that we were never truly welcome here. Vexther's eyes opened fully now, confused by the human's tone. Other delegates began paying attention. Humanity will remember this day, Taemin continued. We will remember who stood with us and who turned away. We will remember that when we needed you most, you blamed us for our own suffering. He closed his datapad with a sharp click that echoed through the silent chamber. We are done here. The entire human delegation stood as one. No scrambling, no chaos, no raised voices. They simply rose from their seats with perfect military precision. Captain Hannah moved to the front, establishing a walking formation. Ji-won wiped her eyes but kept her head high. They walked toward the exit. Not quickly, not running, just a steady, measured pace. Every step seemed to echo. The massive assembly hall, filled with nearly 1,000 species, had gone completely silent. Everyone watched the humans leave. Thrax's translator caught his confused chittering. Where do they think they're going? No one answered him. Because deep down, in some primal part of their beings, even the elder species recognized what they were witnessing. Humanity wasn't running away in defeat. They were choosing to leave. There was a difference, and that difference was terrifying. The great doors of the assembly hall opened before the human delegation. As Taemin passed through them, he didn't look back. Not once. Behind him, he could hear delegates beginning to murmur, to question, to wonder if perhaps they had made a mistake. Captain Hannah was the last human to leave. She paused in the doorway for just a moment, looking back at the chamber. Her expression was unreadable, but something about it made even Speaker Vexther shift uncomfortably in his seat. Then she was gone. And the doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder. The assembly hall remained silent for nearly a full minute. Then Speaker Vexther cleared his throat and called for the next item of business, trying to pretend nothing significant had happened. But in the diplomatic quarters circling the assembly station, messages were already being sent across the galaxy. Every species with an embassy was reporting the same thing. The humans had walked out. The youngest species in the council had just rejected the entire Galactic Assembly. Most thought it was suicide. A few wondered if it might be something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something that would change everything. They were right to wonder. 40-8 hours after the walkout, humanity went silent. Every human ship operating in joint military patrols returned to human space. Every trade agreement was suspended pending review. Research stations that had been sharing data with galactic databases simply stopped transmitting. Communication channels remained open for emergencies only. Everything else went dark. Admiral Doyon stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station, watching reports flood in from across human territory. Every captain had followed orders perfectly. Every installation had ceased cooperation exactly on schedule. Humanity had pulled back behind its borders like a turtle retreating into its shell. Next to him, Intelligence Officer Yinji studied the galactic response on her monitors. Her fingers danced across holographic displays, tracking news feeds, diplomatic communications, and intelligence reports from 100 different sources. The Krell are celebrating, she said quietly. Thrak is calling it a victory. He says humans proved they're too weak for galactic politics. Doyon smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Let him celebrate. On Earth, Ambassador Taemin faced a very different kind of battle. The government chambers were in chaos. Politicians shouted at each other, blaming him for the diplomatic disaster. The Prime Minister demanded he apologize to the Council and restore relations immediately. "We can't survive isolated from the galaxy," one minister insisted. "Our economy depends on galactic trade. Our security depends on Council protection. You've doomed us all." Taman listened patiently until they exhausted themselves. Then he spoke in the same calm voice he'd used in the assembly. "With respect, you're wrong about what we depend on." He activated a presentation that Yunji had prepared. Data filled the screens around the chamber. "In 15 years, we've integrated ourselves into galactic infrastructure in ways no one noticed. Human engineers maintain critical systems on 47 different space stations. Human doctors staff emergency medical facilities in regions too dangerous for other species. Human traders operate supply routes that others abandoned as unprofitable." The Prime Minister frowned. "So, that just proves we need them?" "No," Taman replied. "It proves they need us. Watch what happens now that we've stopped." The first cracks appeared within a week. On the world of Velthera, a bacterial infection swept through the population. The disease was usually harmless, but a mutation had made it deadly. Dr. Soman, a human xenobiologist, had developed a cure 2 years earlier while working at a joint research facility. But when Veltheran officials contacted her for the cure's formula, they found her laboratory had been shut down. All data had been moved to human-only databases. 3,000. Veltherans died before their own scientists could develop an alternative treatment. It took them 6 weeks. Dr. Soman could have solved it in 6 hours. But no one could reach her. Agricultural worlds discovered their crop yields dropping. For 5 years, they'd been using modified seeds developed by human botanists. The seeds were more resistant to disease and produced 30% more food. But the next generation of seeds required special treatment that only the human researchers knew. Without that knowledge, the crops began failing. Military operations across the galaxy started experiencing problems. Human tactical analysts had been embedded in joint operations for years, their algorithms improving combat efficiency by measurable amounts. Now those algorithms were gone, and commanders who had relied on them struggled to adapt. Speaker Vexther called an emergency council session. "The humans are being children about this," he announced. "They'll come back when they realize isolation hurts them more than it hurts us." But privately, his advisors were less confident. Reports kept coming in about problems caused by humanity's absence. Small problems, individually. Together, they painted a troubling picture. Admiral Doyan met with Taemin and Unji in a secure facility beneath Seoul. The 3 of them sat around a simple table, reviewing the galaxy's response. "We've been too accommodating," Doyan said. "We gave freely of our knowledge, our resources, our blood. We asked only for a seat at the table. Instead, they showed us we're expendable." Yunji pulled up more data. 15 years ago, we entered galactic society with nothing to offer but enthusiasm. We worked harder than anyone else. We took jobs others didn't want. We solved problems others ignored. We didn't realize what we were building. Taemin studied the information carefully. Humanity hadn't conquered anything. They hadn't seized power. They had simply become indispensable through competence and willingness to help. Now that help had been withdrawn, the galaxy was discovering how much they'd depended on it. "What about the Krell?" Taemin asked. Doyan's expression hardened. "Thrak launched another raid. A mining outpost in the Helios sector. He thought we'd abandoned it. Had we?" "Yes, but we left them a gift." The Krell attack fleet had arrived at the mining outpost expecting easy prey. They found empty facilities and no resistance. Warlord Thrak himself led the boarding party. Eager to claim more human territory, the proximity mines activated when his flagship was too deep inside the facility to escape. The explosions were perfectly calibrated, tearing through Krell armor and shields. 17 warships were destroyed in under 5 minutes. Thrak's flagship survived, but barely. The Krell limped home, their confidence shattered. They had expected soft humans, easy victims. Instead, they found calculated brutality. The humans had turned an entire outpost into a trap. Sacrificing their own facility to send a message, Thrax's surviving officers reported something even more disturbing. The mines had been placed with surgical precision, maximum damage with minimum explosives. The humans hadn't acted in rage or panic. They had planned this, prepared it, and executed it perfectly. Across the galaxy, other species began paying attention. The humans weren't hiding in fear. They were withdrawing deliberately, strategically, and they were demonstrating capabilities no one had known they possessed. Yunji showed Taman intelligence reports from multiple sources. Half the council species are reconsidering their vote. They're realizing we weren't asking for special treatment. We were asking for basic justice. And when they refused, we simply stopped helping them. Will they apologize? Taman asked. Doyan shook his head. The elder species never apologize. They'll wait for us to come back on our knees. Then they'll wait forever, Taman said quietly. In the Galactic Assembly, Speaker Vexter tried to maintain order, but he could feel control slipping away. Species that had voted against humanity were now questioning that decision. Others were demanding the Council reach out to the humans, offer compromises, find a solution, but the elder species remained stubborn. They had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They would not bow to a species barely old enough to qualify as spacefaring. Admiral Doyan prepared the next phase of humanity's response. In shipyards hidden throughout human space, vessels were being readied. Not invasion fleets. Not world destroyers. But ships designed for a very specific purpose. Yunji had identified every Krell forward base, every supply depot, every weakness in their military infrastructure. Human intelligence networks had been watching and learning for 15 years. Now that knowledge would be weaponized. Captain Hannah received her orders with grim satisfaction. She had watched her people die at New Hanseong. She had stood in the assembly and listened to Thrak mock their suffering. Now she would teach him what humans were truly capable of when pushed too far. The galaxy had seen humanity as peaceful traders and helpful researchers. They were about to discover that humans had other skills as well. Skills learned over thousands of years of warfare on Earth. Skills that had been held in reserve, hoping they would never be needed. Tae-Min looked out over Earth from his office, the blue planet turning slowly beneath the orbital platform. 15 years ago, humanity had reached for the stars with hope and wonder. They had wanted to join the galactic community as friends and partners. Now they would join it on different terms. Not as conquerors, but not as victims either. They would carve out their place in the galaxy through strength, through competence, through the simple fact that the universe worked better when humanity was part of it. The silence continued. And in that silence, the galaxy began to understand that something had changed. The humans weren't coming back to apologize. They weren't begging for readmission, they were waiting. Planning, preparing, and that was somehow more terrifying than any declaration of war. Captain Hannah stood on the bridge of the destroyer Indomitable, watching her tactical display with focused intensity. Around her, the bridge crew worked in perfect silence, each person knowing their role exactly. They had trained for this mission for 6 weeks, but in truth, they had been preparing for it their entire military careers. The Indomitable was not like other human ships the galaxy had seen. For 15 years, humanity had kept its true military capabilities hidden, showing the Council only what they needed to see. Now, 12 destroyers exactly like Hana's ship emerged from dark space at the edge of Krell territory. They were fast, heavily armed, and equipped with stealth technology, reverse-engineered from 6 different species and improved upon by human ingenuity. Fleet Commander J coordinated the attack from his flagship. His voice came through on Hana's command channel, calm and professional. All ships, confirm targets. 12 captains confirmed they were in position. The Krell had 3 forward military bases in this sector, staging areas for raids into human space. Intelligence Officer Yunji's analysis had mapped every detail of these installations over years of careful observation. Now that information would be put to use. Execute, Jay ordered. The human fleet struck all 3 bases simultaneously. Missiles launched in perfect coordination, overwhelming point defense systems through sheer volume and precision timing. The Krell had grown comfortable, confident in their military superiority. They learned too late that confidence and competence were not the same thing. Hannah's ship targeted the communications array first. Without communications, the base couldn't call for help or coordinate its defense. Then came the power generation facilities, the shield generators, the weapons platforms. Each target was destroyed in sequence, methodically. Like a surgeon removing a tumor, the Krell fought back, but their response was chaotic and disorganized. They had expected their military might to deter human retaliation. They had not expected humans to be this good at warfare. Inside the main base, Warlord Thrak watched his command center descend into chaos. Alarms blared from every console. His officers shouted conflicting reports. Ships were exploding. Shields were failing. The humans were everywhere and nowhere, striking from unexpected angles with impossible accuracy. He had called humans soft. He had mocked their civilization as weak and young. Now he was discovering what humans had been holding back all those years. They played the role of helpful newcomers. The attack lasted 4 hours. When it was over, all 3 Krell forward bases were burning wreckage. Human casualties were minimal. They had achieved complete tactical surprise and overwhelming success, but Hannah wasn't finished. As her ship pulled back to a safe distance, she opened a transmission on all Krell military frequencies. Her face appeared on every screen in every Krell ship within range. "This is Captain Hannah of the Human Defense Fleet. The bases you just lost were used to launch raids against civilian populations. You murdered 3,000 of my people. Now you understand there are consequences." She paused, letting her words sink in. "To any Krell commander listening, you have a choice. Continue attacking human worlds and face destruction, or stand down and live. We are not interested in conquest. We are interested in justice. The choice is yours." The transmission ended. Across Krell space, military officers stared at their screens in shocked silence. Many had believed humans were incapable of such precise, devastating military action. They had been catastrophically wrong. In one of the disabled bases, a junior Krell officer named Vorn made a decision. He accessed the base's emergency beacon and transmitted a surrender signal. Within minutes, human shuttles arrived with medical teams. They treated Krell wounded alongside their own, demonstrating the same professional efficiency they had shown in combat. Vor watched a human medic work on his injured commander, saving the life of someone who hours ago had been trying to kill humans. The medic's hands were steady and skilled. She never hesitated, never showed hate or anger. She just did her job. "Why are you helping us?" Vorn asked through his translator. The medic glanced at him briefly. "Because this is what civilized people do. We'll kill you in combat if we must. But we won't let you bleed to death after you've surrendered." That moment would be replayed across the galaxy in the coming days. Humans were capable of precise military violence, but they were also capable of mercy. The combination was somehow more frightening than pure brutality would have been. "Fleet." Commander J broadcast a message across all galactic frequencies. Every species with communication technology received it within hours. "To those who raid human worlds, you will be found. You will be stopped. To those who trade fairly with humanity, our markets remain open. To the Galactic Council, we are no longer seeking your approval. We are simply doing what you refuse to do. We are enforcing justice." The message was not a declaration of war. It was a statement of fact. Humanity had stopped asking permission and started taking action. Warlord Thrak, trapped in his damaged flagship, refused to surrender. He rallied his remaining forces for a last stand, determined to prove Krell superiority. His ship limped toward human space, broadcasting threats and challenges. Captain Hannah intercepted him 3 days later. Her ship dropped out of dark space directly in his path. For a moment, the 2 vessels hung in space, predator and prey, hunter and hunted. Thrak opened a channel, his mandibles clicking with rage. "You cannot defeat the Krell Dominion. We are ancient warriors. You are children." Hannah's expression didn't change. Then let's see if ancient warriors can match modern soldiers. The battle was brutally short. Thrak's flagship was already damaged from the base attack. Hannah's ship was fresh, fast, and operated by a crew trained to perfection. When Thrak's shields collapsed, Hannah gave him one final chance to surrender. He refused. The boarding action that followed was vicious. Krell warriors fought with desperate courage, but human marines moved through the ship like ghosts. Among them was Mireille, a civilian who had survived the New Hanseong massacre. She had volunteered for the militia, trained harder than anyone else, and earned her place on the assault team. She found Thrak in his command chamber, surrounded by his personal guard. The fight was personal and savage. When the last guard fell, Mireille stood over the wounded warlord, her weapon trained on his thorax. Thrak looked up at her with something that might have been respect. "You were soft." I said this. Mireille's voice was steady, but her eyes burned with remembered loss. "You called us soft because we value life, because we prefer peace. You mistook kindness for weakness." She shifted her grip on her weapon. "This is humanity being soft. Imagine what we're like when we're angry." Thrak died moments later, not from Mireille's weapon but from wounds sustained in the fighting. She watched him go without satisfaction or joy. Just grim acknowledgement that justice, in its own brutal way, had been served. The news of Thrak's defeat spread across the galaxy faster than light travel should allow. The Krell Dominion, one of the most feared military powers in the region, had been humbled by humanity in less than a month. Their forward bases were destroyed. Their legendary warlord was dead. Their military superiority was revealed as illusion. Within 3 weeks, the Krell government sued for peace. They agreed to pay reparations for New Hanseong. They withdrew all forces from human space. They signed treaties promising never to attack human civilians again. More importantly, they told the truth to the rest of the galaxy. Humans were not weak. Humans were not soft. Humans had been holding back, choosing peace over war, choosing cooperation over conflict. But when pushed too far, when justice was denied, humans were capable of devastating military action. Speaker. Vexler received reports of the Krell's surrender with growing unease. This was not how things were supposed to work. Young species were supposed to learn from elder species. They were supposed to accept their place in the galactic order. They were not supposed to simply ignore that order and create their own rules, but that was exactly what humanity had done. And they had succeeded. Admiral Doyon addressed his fleet after the Krell surrender. "We didn't want this war. We asked for justice peacefully. When that failed, we took justice into our own hands. Remember, we fight not for conquest or glory, but because someone has to stand against those who prey on the innocent." His words were recorded and broadcast across human space. They became a rallying cry, a statement of purpose. Humanity had discovered its role in the galaxy, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as the species willing to fight for what was right when others turned away. The galaxy watched and wondered what would come next. Speaker. Vexler stood before the Galactic Council, attempting to maintain the dignity and authority his position demanded. But the chamber that had once held 847 species now had many empty seats. Nearly 200 delegations had simply not shown up for the emergency session. The ancient reptilian cleared his throat, scales rustling with age and barely concealed anxiety. "We must address the human situation. Their military actions against the Krell Dominion violated established protocols for conflict resolution." A delegate from the Velkin Assembly rose to speak. Her species had been council members for 6,000 years, part of the old guard that supported traditional power structures. The humans must be brought to heel. They cannot be allowed to act unilaterally. But before Vexler could respond, a younger species delegate stood. The Taurian representative was new to the council, his species having joined only 3 centuries earlier. "The humans acted because we failed them. We watched civilians die and did nothing. Perhaps we should be discussing our own failures." The chamber erupted in debate. For the first time in Vexler's long tenure, the council was truly divided. The elder species demanded humanity be sanctioned, punished, forced back into compliance. The younger species questioned whether the old system deserved to continue at all outside the council chambers. The galaxy was already fracturing. Ambassador Taemin worked from a simple office on the human colony world of Nova Sol, far from the grand halls of the Galactic Assembly. He had moved his base of operations deliberately, making it clear humanity was no longer interested in being close to the council's seat of power. His communication console showed incoming messages from 60 different species, not official government communications, but private channels from sympathetic diplomats, scientists, and business leaders who agreed the old system was broken. Researcher Ji-Wan had become an unexpected bridge builder. Her colleagues from a dozen different species reached out, asking about the independent research collective she was organizing. They were tired of the council's restrictions on knowledge sharing, tired of elder species hoarding technology, tired of research being controlled by political considerations. The first meeting of the Independent Scientific Alliance took place on a neutral space station. Scientists from 40 species attended, sharing data freely, discussing projects without political interference. Ji-Wan stood before them, nervous but determined. "We're not trying to destroy the Council's research institutions," she explained. "We're just building an alternative. A place where knowledge matters more than politics, where cooperation is based on merit rather than species age." Medical breakthroughs began flowing from the Alliance within weeks. A cure for a disease that had plagued the Novan species for generations. Agricultural improvements that could feed millions. Engineering solutions that made space travel safer and more efficient. All of it shared freely, without the bureaucratic delays that plagued council-controlled research. The message was clear. Cooperation didn't require the council. In fact, cooperation worked better without them. Merchant Prince Borum organized the economic response from his headquarters on New Bizon Station. He had spent 15 years building trade relationships across the galaxy, always playing by the Council's rules, always working within their economic frameworks. Now he was building something new. The free trade network started with human ships, offering better rates and faster delivery than Council-sanctioned monopolies. But it quickly expanded as other species joined. Independent traders tired of paying tribute to elder species. Corporations found a welcome home in Borum's network. Human military escorts protected the trade routes, demonstrating that the Council's security guarantees weren't the only option. Within 3 months, the free trade network was moving more cargo than several of the Council's official trade organizations. Borum met with representatives from smaller species who had always struggled under the Council's economic system. "You don't need permission to trade fairly," he told them. "You don't need ancient species taking a cut of every transaction. You just need partners who respect you." The economic shift was subtle at first, then suddenly obvious. Wealth began flowing through different channels. Species that had been economically dependent on the Council found alternatives. The elder species' financial power, built over millennia, started to erode. Speaker Vexter finally understood what was happening. The humans weren't trying to conquer the galaxy through military force. They were making the Galactic Council irrelevant. And it was working. He called for another emergency session, this time demanding military action against the human insurgency. But when the vote was called, something unprecedented happened. The motion failed. Not just by a small margin, but by a significant majority. Even some elder species voted against it. Ambassador Taemin addressed the breakaway species through a broadcast that reached across known space. He stood in a simple room with no elaborate decorations, no symbols of power. Just a man speaking truth. "We don't want an empire. We don't want to rule you. We don't want revenge against those who failed us, though we would be justified in seeking it." He paused, his expression calm but intense. "We propose something different. An alliance of free worlds, where every voice matters regardless of species age. Where decisions are made by merit and evidence, not tradition and power. Where justice is applied fairly to all." The proposal spread across the galaxy like fire in dry grass. Species tired of elder dominance, frustrated by bureaucratic inefficiency, and inspired by humanity's example began declaring their intention to join. Not because humans were perfect, but because they offered an alternative to a system that clearly wasn't working. Captain Hana watched the political developments from her ship. She had expected to spend months or years fighting. Instead, humanity was winning through diplomacy, economics, and simple competence. The military victories had been necessary to prove they couldn't be bullied. But the real victory was happening in council chambers and trade stations across the galaxy. "We broke something," she said to her first officer. "The old order held together because everyone believed it was the only way. We proved that was a lie." Within 6 months of the walkout, 412 species had joined what they were calling the Alliance of Free Worlds. The old Galactic Council still commanded 435 species, but many of them were wavering. The younger members especially were questioning their allegiance. Speaker Vexter sat alone in his chambers, surrounded by records and histories of the Council. His species had helped found this institution 8,000 years ago. It had brought stability and peace to the galaxy, or so he had always believed. Now he was forced to confront uncomfortable truths. The Council had become stagnant. The elder species had grown arrogant. They had valued tradition over justice, power over fairness. And when a young species had challenged them, they had responded with dismissal rather than introspection. He requested a private meeting with Ambassador Taemin. The request itself was extraordinary. The Speaker of the Galactic Council did not request meetings with ambassadors of individual species. Ambassadors requested audiences with him, but things had changed. They met on a neutral station, in a small conference room with no recording devices, no witnesses, no official record. Vexter saw immediately that Taemin had also changed. The earnest diplomat who had pleaded for justice 6 months ago was gone. In his place sat someone harder, more confident. Someone who had learned that power respected strength more than words. "You wanted to speak with me," Taemin said. His voice neutral, Vexter struggled with words that did not come easily to his species. "I was wrong. My species was wrong. We saw you as children because your civilization is young. We forgot that children grow up." Taemin listened without expression. "The Council is fracturing," Vexter continued. "Species are leaving. Our authority is collapsing. This benefits no one. The galaxy needs order." "The galaxy needs justice," Taemin corrected. "Order without justice is just tyranny with better manners." "What do you want?" Vexter asked finally. "What will it take for humanity to return to the Council?" Taemin leaned forward slightly. "We don't need your apology, though it's noted. We need structural change. The old Council can continue if it wishes, but it must reform. Equal representation. Justice applied fairly. No more rule by the ancient while younger species suffer." "And if we refuse?" Taemin's expression didn't change, but his words carried absolute certainty. "Then the Council becomes a historical footnote. The galaxy will move on without you. Cooperation will continue, trade will flow, research will advance. All of it outside your control." Vexter realized he was negotiating from weakness, something he had never experienced in 300 years as Speaker. The humans held all the advantages now. Not through conquest, but through offering something better. "I'll bring your proposal to the Council," Vexter said quietly. "No," Taemin replied. "You'll bring it to those species willing to reform. The others can keep their old council if they wish. But the galaxy is changing whether they accept it or not." The meeting ended with no agreement, no resolution. But both participants knew the truth. The old order was dying. What would replace it remained to be seen. The Federation Hall on Nova Sol was smaller than the old Galactic Assembly Chamber, but it felt larger in the ways that mattered. Natural light streamed through transparent aluminum walls designed by architects from 17 different species. Instead of ranked platforms emphasizing hierarchy, the chamber featured circular seating where every delegation could see every other delegation as equals. Ambassador Taemin stood in the center of the chamber, looking at representatives from 412 species. 6 months ago, this would have been impossible to imagine. Now it was reality. The Alliance of Free Worlds had moved from concept to functioning government faster than anyone had predicted. Admiral Doyen watched from the observation gallery, no longer in uniform but in civilian clothes. The military phase was over. Now came the harder work of building something that would last. Speaker Vexler attended the opening ceremony, though his presence was controversial. Many species wanted him excluded, viewing him as a symbol of everything wrong with the old system. But Taman had insisted he be invited. Not as Speaker of the Galactic Council, but as representative of his own species. The old reptilian looked smaller somehow, diminished by his loss of authority. But he had made a choice. His species would join the Alliance and support the reforms. Not all elder species agreed. Some clung to the old council, maintaining their exclusive club of ancient civilizations. But their numbers dwindled daily as more species realized the future belonged to those willing to change. Captain Hannah had been promoted to admiral, though she joked that she preferred being called captain. She commanded the Alliance Defense Force, a military organization deliberately designed to prevent any single species from dominating. Officers from 40 different species served under her command, positions earned through merit rather than species prestige. The ADF's first major operation had been a humanitarian mission. A volcanic eruption on a council world threatened millions of lives. The Alliance responded immediately, sending ships and personnel without waiting for official requests. They evacuated civilians, provided medical care, and helped with reconstruction. Many of those civilians belonged to species that had voted against humanity in the assembly 6 months earlier. The ADF saved them anyway. When asked why, Hannah had given a simple answer: because it's the right thing to do. We don't abandon people based on politics. That mission did more to win hearts and minds than any military victory could have achieved. The message was clear: the Alliance valued all lives, not just those of member species. Researcher Jiwan stood before the Alliance's first scientific congress, presenting breakthroughs that had come from the Independent Scientific Alliance, medical technologies that saved lives across dozens of species, agricultural improvements that reduced hunger, energy systems that were cleaner and more efficient. This is what happens when we cooperate freely, she told the assembled scientists. When politics doesn't interfere with research. When knowledge flows based on need rather than bureaucratic approval. The old council still maintained its own research institutions, but the best scientists were quietly migrating to the Alliance. Not because they were forced to, but because they could do better work there. Merchant Prince Boram watched economic reports with satisfaction. The free trade network had become the dominant commercial force in 3 sectors. More importantly, wealth was being distributed more fairly. Smaller species that had always struggled financially were thriving. The massive corporations controlled by elder species were losing market share to innovative startups from younger civilizations. Economics isn't about who's oldest or most powerful, Borum told a gathering of Alliance business leaders. It's about who provides the best value. When you remove artificial barriers and let competition work naturally, everyone benefits except those who were abusing the old system. The old Galactic Council still existed, but it was increasingly irrelevant. They passed resolutions that no one followed. They issued demands that everyone ignored. The elder species that remained met in their Grand Assembly Hall, discussing how to restore their authority while the galaxy moved on without them. Some younger species still belonged to both organizations, trying to maintain relationships in both camps. But the trend was clear. The Alliance was growing stronger while the Council grew weaker. Speaker Vexler addressed the first joint session between Alliance representatives and Reformist Council members. It was the moment everyone had been anticipating. Would the 2 organizations remain separate, competing for influence? Or would they find a way to unify? My species built the Galactic Council 8,000 years ago with noble intentions, Vexler began. His voice was steady but carried the weight of painful realization. We sought to bring order to a chaotic galaxy. We succeeded, perhaps too well. We became so focused on maintaining order that we forgot about justice. We became so proud of our age that we dismissed the wisdom younger species could offer. He paused, looking directly at Taemin. Humanity taught us a hard lesson. They showed us that our system was broken not by attacking it directly, but by building something better. They didn't ask our permission. They didn't need our approval. They simply demonstrated that cooperation based on equality works better than hierarchy based on age. The chamber was completely silent. I proposed that we merge the Galactic Council and the Alliance of Free Worlds into a single federation. One government, one set of laws, one commitment to equality and justice for all species. The elder species will maintain their dignity and their voice, but they will no longer hold privileged positions simply because of their age. Every species, young or old, will be judged by the same standards. The proposal had been negotiated for weeks in private meetings, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real. The galaxy was witnessing the end of one era and the beginning of another. Ambassador Taemin stood to respond. Humanity never wanted to destroy the Galactic Council. We wanted it to live up to its own ideals. We wanted justice, equality, and fair treatment. When we didn't receive those things, we built our own path. He looked around the chamber at hundreds of different species, each with their own history, culture, and perspective. Today, we have the opportunity to create something better than either organization alone. A federation that values all voices. A government that serves all people. A future where justice isn't determined by how old your civilization is, but by what's right. The vote took 3 hours. Every species present voted, their decisions recorded for history. When the count finished, the result was overwhelming. The Federation of United Worlds would replace both the Galactic Council and the Alliance of Free Worlds. Not everyone agreed. 37 elder species refused to join, maintaining their own separate council of ancients. They controlled significant resources and territory, and they insisted the old ways would prevail eventually, but they were a minority and shrinking. Even among the holdouts, younger members of those species were questioning their government's decisions. Captain Hannah stood on Earth, looking up at the stars. She remembered the day they had walked out of the assembly, the fury and frustration that had driven them. So much had changed since then. Do you think it will last? Asked Myre, who had become Hannah's aide after the war with the Krell ended. Hannah considered the question carefully. Nothing lasts forever, but we've given the galaxy something better than what it had. Equal representation. Merit-based advancement. Justice that applies to everyone. That's worth fighting for. Myre smiled. You sound like a politician now. Don't insult me, Hannah replied. But she was smiling too. Researcher Jiwan broadcast humanity's complete star charts to the galactic database, a gift to every species. Unexplored regions, potential colony sites, scientific mysteries waiting to be solved. It was humanity's way of saying cooperation was still possible. That they still believed in sharing knowledge for the common good. The final scene of this chapter in galactic history took place in the new Federation Hall. Ambassador Taemin stood at the center, appointed as the first Chancellor of the Federation of United Worlds. Not because he was human, but because every species present had voted for him. He looked around at the diverse assembly, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This was what they had fought for. Not human dominance, but genuine equality. Not revenge, but justice. Not isolation, but cooperation on fair terms. Today begins something new, Taemin said, his voice carrying to every delegate. We prove that the galaxy belongs to all of us. Not the strong. Not the ancient. All of us. We'll make mistakes. We'll face challenges. We'll disagree on countless issues. But we'll face them together, as equals, with respect for every voice in this chamber. He paused, then smiled slightly. Now let's get to work. We have a galaxy to govern. The delegates applauded, a sound that mixed hundreds of different expressions of approval. Clicking mandibles, humming resonances, tapped appendages, and human clapping all blended together into something new. The sound of unity through diversity. Outside the Federation Hall, ships from 100 species came and went, carrying goods, knowledge, and people across the galaxy. The old barriers were falling. New connections were forming. The future was being written not by the oldest civilizations, but by all of them working together. Admiral Doyon, watching the ceremony from his retirement home on Earth, allowed himself a rare moment of satisfaction. They had done it. Not through conquest or intimidation, but through standing firm on principles and proving that a better way was possible. The galaxy had watched in terror as humans stormed out of the assembly. They had feared war, destruction, the chaos of a young species rejecting galactic order. Instead, they had witnessed transformation. The terror hadn't come from human aggression, but from the realization that their entire civilization could be peacefully restructured by a species with better ideas. And in the end, that was the most human thing of all. Not the fighting, not the military victories, not even the diplomatic maneuvering. It was the stubborn belief that the universe could be better. Combined with the determination to make it so, the galaxy would never be the same. And that, finally, was a good thing.